1881 The Russian Empire. A wave of violence sweeps across the land. Mobs armed with axes and torches descend on Jewish villages. Homes are burned. Families are butchered. The police stand by and watch. This was the beginning of the Russian pogroms, a state-sanctioned campaign of terror against the Jewish people. Over the next decade, thousands would die, and millions would be reduced to poverty. The Tsar, Alexander III, had a solution. He called it forced isolation. He wanted the Jews to stay in Russia, trapped in poverty, until they either converted to Christianity or disappeared. But he had underestimated one man. Baron Maurice de Hirsch was the wealthiest Jewish banker of his time. He had built his fortune from nothing, financing the legendary Orient Express railway that linked Europe to the Ottoman Empire. He socialized with royalty, the Prince of Wales, the Austrian Archduke Rudolf. But when he saw the suffering of his people, he did something extraordinary. He offered the Russian government £10 million, a fortune, to create schools and provide for the Jews. The Tsar refused. Hirsch was furious. So he devised a plan. A plan that would use his financial power to bypass the Tsar completely. He would negotiate with the Russian government, not as a subject, but as an equal. He would use his fortune to buy the freedom of hundreds of thousands of Jews and take them out of Russia by the boatload. He would move them to a new world. He would create a new Zion. This is the story of the Jewish financier who stopped the Tsar. A man who used his billions to outmaneuver an empire. His name was Baron Maurice de Hirsch. And his legacy still lives on today. To understand Hirsch's mission, we need to go back to the 1880s. Russia's Jewish population was enormous, over 5 million people. They lived mostly in the Pale of Settlement, a strip of land in the west of the empire. They were forbidden from owning land, from entering professions, and from living in major cities. They were the scapegoats for every social and economic problem in the empire. In 1881, following the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, the Russian government openly encouraged attacks on Jewish communities. The violence was brutal. Over 200 pogroms erupted across the empire. Homes were burned. Businesses were destroyed. Women were assaulted. Thousands of Jews were killed, and hundreds of thousands fled with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The refugees poured into the ports of Europe. They were desperate, traumatized, and impoverished. Most ended up in the United States. Between 1880 and 1890, over 700,000 Russian Jews arrived in America. The American government was alarmed. The U.S. Secretary of State wrote to the Russian foreign minister, warning that the influx was becoming a burden beyond the resources of the benevolent societies. Baron de Hirsch was horrified. He was a German Jew who had achieved everything: wealth, status, and access to the highest circles of European power. But he had never forgotten his roots. His wife, Clara, was also deeply involved in philanthropy. On the death of their only son, Lucien, in 1887, Hirsch famously wrote, "My son I have lost, but not my heir. Humanity is my heir." He decided that saving his people would be his life's work. In 1891, Hirsch founded the Jewish Colonization Association, the JCA. He poured over $100 million of his personal fortune into it. It became the largest charitable organization on the planet. Its mission was simple: buy land, build colonies, and move the Jews of Russia to safety. But there was a problem. The Tsar refused to let them leave. Hirsch knew he couldn't just take millions of people out of Russia without the government's permission. So he used his financial power to negotiate. He went directly to the Russian government. He offered them a deal: allow mass emigration, and he would finance it entirely, including education, transport, and settlement costs. The negotiations were tense. The Russian government was suspicious. They didn't want to lose their Jewish population. They wanted to keep them in poverty as a scapegoat. But Hirsch had leverage. The United States was pressuring Russia directly. American diplomats warned that the mass emigration was creating a crisis. Hirsch used this to his advantage. Hirsch's plan was brilliant. He didn't want to send the Jews to America. America was already overwhelmed. Instead, he bought enormous tracts of land in Argentina, Canada, and Brazil. In Argentina alone, the JCA purchased over 50,000 hectares of farmland. They established colonies like Moisesville, named in his honor. The goal was to turn refugees into farmers, to give them land and dignity. In 1892, the Russian government finally agreed. They would allow the emigration, provided Hirsch's organization handled the logistics. A central committee was formed in St. Petersburg. Within months, the first ships left Odessa, carrying thousands of families to safety. Hirsch had achieved what no one else could. He had forced the Tsar's hand. He had stopped a Czar. Theodore Roosevelt would later praise him as one of the world's greatest philanthropists. Theodor Herzl, the founder of Zionism, considered Hirsch's Argentine project as a potential alternative to Palestine. Baron de Hirsch never stopped working. He donated tens of millions to hospitals, schools, and charities across Europe and North America. When he died in 1896, his fortune was estimated at $100 million. His wife, Clara, continued his work, donating another $15 million in the 3 years before her death. The colonies were not always easy. The climate was harsh. The settlers struggled to adapt. Many drifted to the cities. But they survived. By 1930, over 20,000 Jewish colonists were living on JCA lands in Argentina alone. Thousands more had settled in Canada, the United States, and Brazil. Today, Argentina has one of the largest Jewish communities in the world. It was Hirsch's vision that made it possible. He never wanted to create a Jewish state. He believed that Jews should integrate into the societies they lived in. He wanted them to have land, work, and dignity, not ghettos, not persecution. Hirsch moved over 100,000 Jews to safety in just a few years. His organization continued its work for decades. He used his fortune not to buy palaces, but to buy freedom. He used his power not to oppress, but to liberate. Baron Maurice de Hirsch was the embodiment of what one determined individual can achieve. When the Tsar refused to help his people, Hirsch stepped forward. He didn't just donate money. He used his wealth as a weapon against tyranny, against hatred, and against the cruelty of empire. He stopped a Tsar. He saved a people. And his story is a testament to the power of one man's will.